Hey y'all, before we start this week's episode, I just wanted to remind you and let you know that coming up starting September 1st, we are going to be launching a free 30-day self-care challenge. And what this entails is 30 days of information. So very small 1% shifts each day. Each week's going to have a different topic. Every day you will receive an email, and within that email, there'll be a short audio so you can listen to it on the go. And then there will be a journal prompt. And so if you are somebody who likes to journal, if you're somebody who wants to dig a little bit deeper and start to express some of the things that you are thinking about or have internal feelings on, this prompt will help you to do that. So remember, each day is just a little tiny tool, tip, process that you can think about, get curious about, and start to implement if it feels right for you. And as you go through these 30 days, you're going to build a tool belt. And in that tool belt, you're going to have different tools. And so just think of each day as a different tool. And remember, in a toolbox, we don't use every tool every day, but it's just having them in there so that when we need them, we can go and get them from a trusted source. I will be dropping in the show notes a link to the landing page so that you can sign up. It will also be on my social media pages, and it's, of course, on my website. All you have to do is put in your first name and your email, and we will get you all the information that you need starting on September 1st. If you know of another mama who might be interested in a self-care challenge, or that you would want to do it with, because remember, the more the merrier, and together we can rise rather than trying to do it by ourselves. So if you know somebody, please extend this information out to them and have them join along, because it'll be super fun. I can't wait to see you guys inside the challenge and hear all the great takeaways that you get each day or each week, and ultimately over the course of 30 days. Talk to y'all soon. Love to you guys, and let's dive into the episode. Hey there, midlife mamas. Welcome to the Healthy Lifestyle Habits podcast, just for midlife mamas. Because let's be real, this midlife chapter is no joke. Our bodies are different, our minds are different, our hormones are different, and we're trying to figure out who we are after momming for all these years. This empty nest phase is an eye-opener for sure. What worked for us in our younger years is no longer serving us because we have so much life experience, and that's okay. This is a supportive space guiding you through those powerful 1% shifts to help you grow. As we know, health is not a one-size-fits-all, so each week you will learn about different topics, taking away tools and tips to implement. This season, we're going to tackle some of the biggest midlife questions that y'all have had about wellness in this chapter. We're going to be chatting about what is holding us back, where do we find joy, how do we prioritize ourselves through self-care. We're always going to be talking about ingredients, daily toxins, food swaps, breath work, and mindset, just to name a few. There's nothing better than feeling empowered to create the best next chapter. Am I right? After each episode, I hope you feel more equipped and at ease to take a step or two that will allow you to thrive. Whether you're a newbie or an OG listener, I am so glad that you're here. Let's embrace this new chapter and thrive together. Are you ready for all the possibilities? If you said yes, say, I am ready. Hey y'all, welcome back to today's episode. We're going to be talking with Abbie Bradford, who is a registered nurse, a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, a restorative wellness practitioner, and a clinical herbalist specializing in gut health and eczema in children. She has a passion for helping families live holistically and allowing children to live their true purpose through root cause natural approaches. She has found this passion through her own health challenges that brought her from allopathic medicine into the natural healing world, where she believes true healing occurs. We're going to talk about gut and skin and eczema and food sensitivity and picky eaters. We're going to talk about navigating our healthcare system, nervous system regulation. So let's get into this juicy episode, because there's going to be so many great takeaways. Hey y'all, welcome back. We're going to be chatting with Abbie today. I'm super excited. I don't know her all that well, but I love all the things that she does. And from her intro, you guys know that she's very well versed and very well educated. So I can't wait to start this conversation. So Abbie, welcome. And how are you doing today?
Hey, thanks so much. So happy to be here to talk to everyone about all things skin and gut health. And yeah, can't wait.
Yeah. So let's just dive right in. So how did you get introduced to gut health and skin issues? And how did that become your main focus?
Yeah, like so many, there's a personal journey involved for sure. And even though this spans for me over more than 10 years of my own personal journey, I am a registered nurse. And so just having that Western medical background was something that I just always knew my entire life that I was going to do something medical. I thought I was maybe going to be a radiologist. Lots of things changed, went into nursing. And I knew immediately when I discovered this deeper way of healing for myself that it was like kind of the light was turned on and there was no turning it off. And I couldn't just continue to do this other model of disease care essentially. And so, yes, I had a lot of gut issues. I did antibiotics at one time for almost a year straight. I have, yeah, I have had lots of different things, you name it, between hormonal, adrenal, thyroid, Lyme, all kinds of things. But at the base of that was a host of gut issues, and we can get into more of that if you want to. It's kind of a long story, but essentially, I was brought to being able to help people in this way and really eventually felt really called to work with children more deeply. And so that is my main focus now is working with children because there is such a gap, and I'm sure we'll talk about this. There is such a gap in care for true healing for this specific condition. And I talk to lots and lots of parents every week how they just know, it's like almost intuitively, they know that there's a deeper way to heal this, and what they're being offered is not, at the doctor's office, is not going to actually heal things. And so I come into this hopefully providing that care in the gap of where this true healing can really happen.
That resonates like literally to my core because that was exactly my experience. My younger daughter had eczema um, probably her whole life, but I wasn't told that's what it was. And, it was like round and round and she had all these issues. But when it was finally, quote unquote, diagnosed as eczema, I'm like, okay, well, how do we treat this? Like, what is this? And, it was, well, try this steroid cream, try this, try that. Um, and that wasn't working. And it really wasn't working for me personally because I'm like, what's the root cause of this? Like, why does she have this? Why is it coming out on her skin like it is? And, eventually by, process of elimination, eliminating doctors, and then finally finding somebody who I coin as, one of the best pediatricians in the world. Um, he's the one that opened my eyes to, he practices both Eastern and Western. And he was the one that opened my eyes to the fact that it was coming from internal, most likely her gut. And so we were going to do things to kind of investigate that and then kind of clean it up. And that's where we found a whole slew of, food sensitivities and immediately linked it up. And so she was able to get true healing. But it's been a journey. And I think so often, and it's really breaks my heart, and I love that you're doing this, is that parents are left in the dark and they're left in the dark with their own health. And then, but that's excusable most of the time to them. They're like, oh, well, we'll just deal with it. But when your baby, your child, it's like the mama bear comes out and then you're like trying to figure it out. So again, I love that you've been called to do this particular thing because it is very close to me and a lot of people suffer. And I want people to know, and you can speak on this, but the things on the outside of your body are coming from internal. So what do you think about all of that? Like, what's your stance on that?
Yeah, exactly. The missing piece here is that things that present in different ways, eczema, it presents on the skin, and it could maybe present in the lungs. It could be asthma, it could be allergies. Those are kind of the atopic triad of things that go together. But even this internal piece that we're talking about can present in so many different ways. It can, in older children, present in ADHD. It can present in cycling women as hormonal problems. The list goes on and on. Acne, all these different kinds of skin issues. there is a internal piece of where this is stemming from, and it's just presenting in a different way for, that person, depending on maybe what their weakness is, and
Mhm.
for kids with eczema, they do have a weakness in the skin. It could be a little bit of genetics in there. It can be lots of other things, though. So when we talk about the bucket of what is going on with these kids, or really anyone that has any sort of chronic symptom, we're thinking about what is going into that to make that bucket tip over and present as a symptom. So in eczema, there is, with kids especially, their buckets of what they can handle are very small. So they can handle less and less of things, especially as a newborn, as an infant, and it gets bigger as they grow, which is a lot of times why docs will say like eczema is something that kids can, quote, grow out of. But we know that they don't actually grow out of it. What they do is their body presents it in a different way because it no longer needs to use the skin as a default detox organ. And so what's going on is internally, that gut piece is where all of, this terrain is that we've got like literally hundreds of feet in there of different terrain of different microbes, and we are more microbes than anything else actually. And so this internal piece that we're talking about specifically is in the gut. And so I think that's the first belief that we have to almost get over or change in order for this to really hit home and start to think about how do we actually heal, because the internal terrain is imbalanced and it's coming through the skin. It's coming through in these rashes. And the immune system, we know, is at least 2/3 of it is in the gut. And so with these different problems, like eczema specifically, it is an imbalanced immune system. That is the problem. And so we know that if at least 60% of the immune system lives in the gut, well, then we've got to look at the gut first and foremost. And it may present in food allergies because the gut is kind of wounded. It's in a wounded state. So you put stuff in there that maybe has proteins that can be a little bit inflammatory depending on the person. If you put something that's a little bit inflammatory on a wound, that's going to hurt. It's not going to like it very much. And so we know that those food reactions are just an imbalanced state and they're not forever. Healing can occur. And I think that's the biggest thing that people need to know, is that these things are not a life sentence. And we can get into some of the traditional routes of how they manage this, but there is definitely a remission and a period of healing that can be achieved by going internal to that terrain, that gut piece.
Yeah. And again, personal experience, that is very true. And with healing, it isn't a life sentence, like you said. And so some of the things that were inflammatory for her, some of the things that were irritants are no longer irritants. But I will caution to say that if you start redumping the same stuff into the bucket's going to get full again. So that's where, like, living your life in a balanced state, and giving and taking once you're healed. If you go back to the exact same lifestyle you had, most likely you're going to end up with the same exact result. So I think that's just important to note, that healing definitely is there, and healing from a root, right? Not just from a surface level, and not just kind of masking the symptoms. And I think that's what I found personally in the traditional doctors, the traditional ways. That's what they were trying to do, and it was not helpful. But for her, getting that, food under control was her key piece. But I also, as she got older, stress played a part of it also. So it very interesting how the dynamics change of what causes the flare-ups, but again, all a lot of internal. So where you are at now, gut is sort of a newer, say new, but a newer kind of stance in the health and wellness world. And I try so hard for people to educate people that it's not a buzzword, right? It's not the new fad. It's not something that's going to come and go. It's just something that wasn't really investigated and understood many, many years ago. And it is coming kind of into the forefront because of the research that's been done, because of people getting educated around it, and then seeing how it is impacting health for the better or for the worse. So when you are talking to people about gut health, where do you start with
the discussion with people who are coming from a lens of no lens, really.
Yeah, it's one of those things that can be a little bit sneaky because we don't always have direct gut symptoms when the gut is imbalanced. And so when we think about what is this system that we depend so heavily on because it literally gives us life. Like it is the nutrition for our cells, the energy that we need comes from this system's ability to break down nutrients and to be able to deliver it to the rest of the body, essentially. But that's just where it starts. It's way more than just digestion and breaking down nutrients and absorbing it. Gut health has so much to do with this microbial balance that we talk about. So when I was saying that we are more bugs than anything, we know that there are literally trillions of bugs that live in a harmonious way in our guts that do so much for us. They do so much more than just sit around and I don't know what people think they do, but they literally they're helping us to digest and absorb the food. There's some bugs that specifically help with B12 absorption and like specific nutrient absorption like that, but they also are a part of this immune terrain that's in the gut too. And so they're working for us all of the time. They are literally helping us to fight off things that shouldn't be there at all. There's things that we get through air, food, water that come in through the gut that we need to have an immune army, essentially, that knows that this is foreign, this is not supposed to be here, and we need to fight that off. And this can be something that we measure actually in stool testing. We can measure that gut immune army. It's called secretory IgA. And that's something that we definitely look at when we do testing in my program. And we need to know that because if the gut immune army is not sufficient, if it's tired, if it's really, it's been working really hard and it's not able to work as well anymore, then you become vulnerable to things coming in. And this could be even, we talk about just your resilience to illness and those kinds of things, just acute illnesses. That's really important. So I hear sometimes people say like, oh, I just have a bad immune system. Like I get sick really easily. And it's like, well, your immune system isn't bad. It's not good or bad. It's probably overwhelmed with something, and it can't have one more job to do. So that's a huge part of the gut health piece is this immune piece. It also helps us to regulate different things like neurotransmitters, like those things that make us feel happy, joyful, peace, determination, courage, like all of these things that can literally come from these brain neurotransmitters actually come from the gut. Serotonin is a big one that helps us to feel calm and sleep, and it leads to production of melatonin, not to get too nerdy here, but those are really important pieces for sleep and energy and immune health, and the list goes on and on of all these functions. And so where we start is north to south. So the digestion is a north to south process. So we start with chewing and then we go down into the stomach and on and on. But it's really important that when we think about gut health, we do need to think about our ability to actually break down those nutrients. Because what happens, and this is a big piece in eczema, is if we're not breaking down those nutrients properly in the north section of the digestion, by the time it gets down south, they're going to be not fully broken down proteins that the immune system does not like to see. It can be very inflammatory. It can get through the gut wall, which is called leaky gut if this happens. Big particles are getting through the gut wall, and the immune system is right on the other side, the big part of the immune system in the bloodstream. And then it says, hey, we don't like these big particles. We don't like this. We're going to react to it. So that's where food allergies and food sensitivities can come from. Those are two different things, but definitely food sensitivities can be healed, I want to say easily, by working on this gut health piece and making sure that we're breaking down food properly, that we are not having this leaky gut situation where things are getting through that shouldn't get through there. And there's a lot more to it than that, but that's kind of where we start, is making sure that you are breaking those things down. And also, when I'm working with someone, we definitely want to look at what is that gut immune army looking like. Maybe it's really heightened because it's full force trying to fight something. And that tells us something too, that there's a lot of maybe invaders here that we need to help get rid of. And I don't know if you want me to go into more of some of the root causes of eczema, like when it comes to gut health, but
Yes.
those are things like when we talk about what are those invaders, what are those things that either there's too much of them or maybe there's things that shouldn't be there at all. So we've got this balance of bacteria that we've been talking about. And we call it a balance because you don't want too little of it, but you don't want too much of it either. We need to have it in balance. So if things get overgrown, a lot of times what happens is you can get too much bacteria, maybe there's too much yeast, maybe there's parasites. We can see all these things on stool testing, and we think about when we have too much, what happens? These guys, they tend to start to affect our absorption of nutrients, but they emit themselves some things that are kind of toxic to the system, and then that's when we get things that come through the skin because the systems get overwhelmed. We've got like liver, kidneys, lymph, we've got these different detox pathways, right, that we can get things out of the body. When we talk about children, their bucket really is their detox system. What can they handle? That is their detox system. And so their bucket is small. And so when we've got these overgrowths of bacteria, yeast, or whatever, those toxins from those excess microbes get put into that bucket, and eventually the bucket does overflow. And that's where we get symptoms, and that's where we get things coming through the skin. So that's a long-winded answer to answer you about gut health, but that's kind of the tie together in this whole thing.
Yeah. All spot on and wonderful. And it's explained in a way that I think everybody listening can understand. And it is very scientific, but it's also can be explained in a way that makes sense to the average person. And I appreciate you being able to articulate it in a way that the average person can understand it. I want to speak about the testing. I talked about it in another episode, a gut episode that I did, because again, through personal journey with my daughter, after the whole eczema thing as a young child during the puberty years, there was at one point where I thought maybe she does have ADD. Like it was just a bizarre, like not being able to impulsive. It was a lot of impulsivity. And from being a teacher, I was like, I know in girls it presents differently and all that. So anyways, I had contacted the doctor and he's like, well, fill out this 1,000,000-page form or whatever. He's like, but before we do anything, we're going to do stool testing and neurotransmitter testing, which was kind of our first, step in that. And I literally talk about it all the time to anybody that'll listen, because the picture that is painted through those two testings alone, I was just shocked, because the other end of the experience that could have happened was walking into the doctor's office, filling out that form because she checked a lot of the boxes and being put on something, which obviously me personally, I would have done the digging, but having these tests done showed us, she had a yeast overgrowth, she had candida, and her neurotransmitters were off, and she was not sleeping as well as she could have. And the impulsivity part was due to the neurotransmitters, and so that was kind of our first exposure to all of that. But what I wanted to tell people that are listening is it doesn't take a lifetime to reverse things. We did have to go on a detox protocol to kill off the unwanted yeast and to, detox it out, which never do on your own, always do with a professional, because you don't want to harm yourself when you're doing it. And if your pathways are not open for disposal, it circulates in your body. And so you could feel worse. But during that time, in 2 weeks, she was like a completely different person. And I want to give hope to people that are out there listening that these things do matter. This testing that she's speaking of, it might cost a little bit, but the resolution that you get and the understanding of what's happening within your body is worth every cent. So I just wanted to make sure, people can relate that, because it's not just something. I feel like a lot of times when we go to a doctor and we get something, it's like a temporary fix kind of. But I think these particular kinds of tests really show something that allows you to get to the root and really start to rectify and heal, which is what we want to do, right? I mean, everybody wants to feel their best. And I think that education that we received as a family really changed our minds as we thought about things. And I still think about things going forward. It's like not just cut and dry, I guess. Nothing's cut and dry. There's always something to it. So when find out, when you're working with somebody, when we're talking about the gut and we're talking about eczema, what are some of the higher food sensitivities that you see? Is there a common thread throughout people that you see with eczema?
Definitely. I mean, we know in the research and just personal experience as well, more clinically, I would say, we know for sure that number one by far is dairy. That's the biggest one that we know. Just the protein in dairy is very inflammatory for a lot of people. And then we've got the lactose piece, which is the sugar piece that some people can't actually break down. But more so, this is a immune intolerance issue where the immune system becomes reactive to this. Now, it doesn't mean that dairy will forever be a problem. Let's talk about the two different kinds of food issues. So there's food allergies, which is an IgE test, which is usually can be a blood test, but this is kind of what they're looking for when they do the skin prick test too. It's kind of that really quick emergent reaction. So IgE food allergies are like thinking about those why people carry EpiPens because it affects their breathing and their swelling in their neck and those kinds of things. So food allergies are definitely a more difficult piece to combat, but it's absolutely possible that once we get the immune system in balance, that it does not react at least as severely or maybe not at all as much to those. Now, when we look at food sensitivities, this is more of an immune reaction that is delayed. So that is what we call IgG, and this can also be a blood test. This is where we're looking at typically within a 72-hour period, symptoms come up. So it could be a skin reaction, it could be an energy issue, brain fog. In kids, we see a lot of, hyperactivity or some of these different things where they're not sleeping, they're not napping, they're not able to really even show who they really are because their personalities, like you were just talking about, can change based on these reactions because inside they get very almost irritated. Histamine specifically, which is one of the immune components involved in this, is very irritating. So they have more temper tantrums. It affects their sleep because of this. They can't focus because of this. It affects so many things. So when we think about these delayed reactions for food sensitivities, it can be in almost any system because the symptoms they could be widespread. So we know that those kinds of food allergies or food sensitivities are easier to combat because it's not such a deep part of the immune system. It's kind of a surface level problem, but dairy is definitely one of those that can be both. So a lot of times what happens is parents will bring their kids into the allergist and they do some sort of allergy testing and they're like, oh, they're not allergic to gluten or dairy or maybe it's like one or two things like peanuts or eggs. They're like, oh, milk is fine, but then they test milk and they know that milk is a problem when they give it to them. Well, that's because it's probably not an IgE food allergy. It's probably a sensitivity that's not going to show up on testing. So I always tell parents the best test really is to do it yourself at home where you're doing more of this. So top 5, dairy, gluten, eggs, peanuts, soy, those are the biggest ones. Sugar, I don't really count as a food sensitivity, but it really contributes to a lot of issues. But really, it's kind of those 5 that we're thinking about being the most problematic. So you can take those out and see a lot of times people get better just from doing that. Now, that's not the solution because we've got to do some internal healing, but that is definitely a good start where okay, we're having some reactions to this, and you can test it by bringing it back in. Now, testing helps you do some of that groundwork as well, but the testing is not 100% accurate, it's not 100% reliable, but it can help us get there. So when you do this at home, and you give them that food and you don't add in one food like that you have taken out more than once every 72 hours, at least going in order. So if you took those 5 out, you're not going to add in soy and you're not going to add in, I don't know, eggs the same within 72 hours because you need one variable at a time and it can take that long for us to see results or to see a reaction. So it can be anything though, which is the part that really drives people crazy. And I really feel for parents because it feels like maybe they're reacting to all kinds of other things. And it totally could be. It could be something that we think is good, like avocado or broccoli. And that's where it kind of, it gets a little bit difficult. And then we don't want to take out so many foods that things get so restrictive. But the other piece to this that is not a sensitivity per se, but can be an issue, is the higher histamine foods. So higher histamine foods, just if the body already has a high histamine load, if you give them spinach or avocado or strawberries and you see a reaction, it's most likely that it's a higher histamine food. So the body just has a hard time dealing with that, and they have sort of a histamine intolerance going on. So I don't want to get too deep in there because it can.
No, and also the other food group, I was saying nightshades. For some people, those are issues. People have issues with nightshades, which are like potatoes,
Tomatoes,
peppers, yes. And it's interesting because again, these are all healthy foods, right? And so people are like, but I'm eating healthy. And it's like, yes, but your body isn't loving that at the moment. And I think, for everybody, it's a bio-individual, journey. And so for what works for one, even within your same family dynamic, what works for one doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for the other. And so there is a lot of experimentation, but I think the empowerment in that is that there are choices, right? We have choices and of how we're going to experiment and how we're going to try out things. And you don't necessarily have to rely on a very strict protocol, because a lot of it is trial and error. And that's unfortunate because it does take a little bit of time, but the results you get, are significant. And I think anybody who tries it, even if you're not having an eczema flare, if you try, eliminating some of these, higher inflammatory foods, it would just be a fun experimentation to see, do I feel better? Because it's all about how do you feel at the end of the day. And when you were talking about your kids not being able to show up as you are, sadly, that definitely was the case for my daughter, because before I knew that she had a milk issue, it's what she drank, and it was like, but the sleepless nights and the tantrums and the things you were talking about, and the doctor's, advice is like, well, she has to scream it out. I'm like, no, like they're not happening in our house. Like she's screaming because she doesn't feel good, like something's wrong with her, and it was like, but again, through some holistic approaches, a chiropractor in North Carolina, he was the one that really reset her nervous system. Like, so when I say I've tried a lot, I will try anything that's, within reason and doable, because what do you have to lose? I mean, that's how I look at it. And I mean, my kids have healed from some of that, but I think there are certain things, I wish that was more mainstream for parents with struggling kids, because it's hard, it's hard to watch it's easier when it's you not feeling well, when your child doesn't feel good, or like you said, they're not showing up as their best selves. There are reasons for that. They're not trying to be disruptive children. I don't believe that to be the case anyways. I think that they're reacting based off of how they feel a lot of times. And but the piece of the elimination where in 2 weeks she was completely able to have self-control, have that impulsivity control, I was just like, we all, my husband and my daughter and, myself were just like, it was like, wow, it's just crazy that, like just 2 weeks that can do that for somebody. But so again, I want to give hope to others out there. Now, if you're an adult and you have eczema and you've never dealt with it, it is the same type of protocol for an adult. And I know that only because I went through it myself, just to see what I had going on. And you can get some of the same exact markers from doing a stool test, from doing a neurotransmitter test, and then looking at functional labs versus traditional labs, because they speak differently to how your body, reacts to certain things. Their range is different than on a normal lab, which, coming from a nurse, being a nurse and being on that side of things, can you talk about labs?
Mm-hmm.
How they look different? I would like for people to be educated on that, because I think it's an important piece to understand when you're getting labs done, so you can be empowered to go in to ask the right questions so that you can get the answers you're really looking for.
Yeah, it can be a little bit tricky because, at least in the US, the system is based on what insurance will pay for. So it can be a little bit difficult to really get a full comprehensive panel that we know that we need. But when it comes to actually looking at, let's say, lab values that are different, the values that we see, say if you go to a LabCorp or a Quest or something like that, and you get your report back and it gives you a reference range and nothing came out of range, so everything's good. And what we know is that those reference ranges are very wide, and they're looking for more blatant disease than anything. And so a lot of times those reference ranges aren't going to catch things before they're severely off. When it comes to functional labs in general, there's just a lot of testing that we do in more of this holistic functional world that mainstream doesn't do it all. They don't do a lot of stool testing unless someone is having some really acute GI issues, and even then they'll do something called an ova and parasite or culture, and those things just miss all kinds of things going on. They're not looking at good bacteria. They're not looking at a lot of these things. It's gotten a little bit better where they do some PCR testing, which is looking for the DNA, but in general, these tests that a GI doc runs, say a stool test, are very insensitive. And so they're not getting the full picture. They're not looking at the gut immune system or any of the digestion pieces. Like they don't support digestion. They don't support really this well-rounded approach that we do in holistic medicine. They also, if you go to an allergist, they will do a little bit of the IgE food allergy testing, but they don't ever really recognize sensitivities. So those are very different as well. Like there's these different things where everything is separated. So you go to a GI doc to get a stool test, and you go to an allergist to get your allergy tests. And but the testing that they do in general, I will say, is very insensitive and it's not very thorough. So you could get a lot of things missed if you're not doing this deeper work. Unfortunately, we do right now have to go outside of that system and usually pay cash in order to get this testing done and to really get these full healing holistic protocols. But like you said before, the money that you're putting into that is a serious investment into your health or your child's health for the rest of their lives. So it is something that we don't want you to have to come back and do over and over. Like say for eczema, you go to a dermatologist or really any of the three docs, allergy, dermatology, or there's the pediatrician, they'll give you a steroid. And because that is the only thing that is in their tool bucket, but that keeps you coming back again and again because it doesn't actually solve anything. It's just suppressing the immune system's reaction. We want to know what's actually causing the immune system to go so haywire in the first place. So that's what the testing tells us. Why is the immune system so haywire? We don't want you to come back over and over again. We want this to be done. We want you to live a maintenance, healthy lifestyle, and then you don't have to continue to do this deeper healing protocol.
Yeah, I love that. I think very spot on. And everybody listening, hopefully you can walk away with some knowledge. And if you've never looked into functional lab testing or looked into functional or integrative type work, and if you don't feel your best and you're at a stage in your life where, you're done, and you're ready to look at things from a different lens, I would definitely highly recommend, looking into one of these avenues, because again, you've got to pick and choose, but you got to start somewhere and somewhere different. You got to do something different if you want a different result. So one of the things that I love also that we haven't even touched on is you have you're a clinical herbalist. And so that is something out of my wheelhouse. And I would love to hear why you went into that and what you've gotten out of it, and how you help families build that toolbox to have things on hand that are more natural alternatives.
Yeah, absolutely. I love herbs for so many reasons. I mean, if you're going to work with people as a practitioner, you're going to be working with herbs if you're in the holistic field. And so being an herbalist is kind of the next step deeper forward into this world of working with herbs in a way that is helping different systems do things that we want them to do. So let me rephrase that. We basically are using herbs in a way that is helping the body to do things that we want to either help it to do a little bit more, or we don't want to do the things that medication is doing, which is like stopping, blocking, something really harsh, right? Herbs are very gentle and they can be powerful, but they have this gentle approach where they have usually like a primary, a secondary, and sometimes a tertiary action. Meaning, like if you're taking an herb for, let's say, yeast overgrowth, there's a good chance that it might have some liver support in there too, just because that's another action that it does, which is very different than, say, medication, where usually the side effect is not positive at all. So I love herbalism because when you become an herbalist, you have to usually take a course where you're connecting with the land as well. So you're actually connecting where these things come from. So I had to do a week-long immersion where we just spent time in all these different, this was in northern Wisconsin, and all these different like prairie, bog, we went to the boreal forest, we looked at all these different environments where these different things were living and seeing like what is the environment that they they grow in, and how does that relate to how we use them in the body? It is no coincidence to me that these things growing wild in the ground do a positive action in our body. There's something divine in that I think is meant for us, that I love so much about herbs. And there's a way that you can use herbs that is kind of like Western medicine, right? It's like a pill for every ill. You can do that with herbs. And to me, that's not true holistic functional medicine. But really, we want herbs to be a supportive thing because you can use them medicinally, you can use them clinically, where you're doing like higher doses and you really want to um, elicit a strong response in the body, but you can also use them where it's just something that's very nutrient dense. Like there's this whole category of herbs called nutritives, like nettle, that are super rich in certain vitamins and nutrients that you can make a strong tea out of every day and get lots of nutrients from. So I like to work with herbs in different ways myself. If I turned this around and showed you my herb cabinet, you would see all these different glass bottles of things that I keep because I like to kind of intuitively just make different blends for myself every day. But then, we use them when I work with clients, we use them typically in either like a liquid tincture form or a capsule form where it's kind of a blend of different things and we're using it differently. But I always try to bring it back to where do these things come from? That's really, in nature, these things are growing where they typically will help the environment. So take, I think mullein is a good example. If you live in sort of at least not the most southern parts of the US, you probably have seen mullein. It's this like really um, almost fuzzy plant that grows in these rocky areas, like really dry, rocky, like just not very nutrient dense soil, but it helps to regenerate the soil. And so it has this purpose within the land, but it also, when we take it, mullein specifically helps with respiratory cough and any sort of kind of bronchial illness. And it kind of regenerates our body in that way, but they have just such a divine purpose, I believe. And I love working with herbs. So I don't know if you have more questions than that. That's kind of
No, I love all of that. And I think a couple of things you said, it is very divine because, I think we just dismiss nature in all aspects of life because we live in this fast paced, crazy world of, convenience and all the other things. But, to me, it's like these things are growing for a purpose. There is a reason behind it. And I think we've just gotten so far away from nature into labs and making things to sell that nettle doesn't cost that much, and mullein doesn't cost that much, and it's all, to me, it all comes back to the dollar. But so nettle it comes in a tea form. So for anybody listening, if somebody was interested in, I'm just using this because you mentioned it, what are some of the benefits of nettle tea for somebody who doesn't know?
So it's very high in lots of nutrients, but one of them is iron. So it can be very high in iron, and you can use that as a very strong infusion. So nettle grows all over. You definitely want to use gloves if you're going to harvest it. But if you look at a picture online, you can go in and cut some nettle, let it dry. You can also just dry it or buy it already cut and sifted.
Mm-hmm.
And you can fill up a mason jar, like a quarter maybe, and put some boiling water over that. It really helps with spring allergies because nettle is amazing as an antihistamine. So I use it, you can use it with eczema kiddos, any allergy issues, anything that's kind of along that histamine line, hives, anything like that. But it's also got that other property where it's a nutritive, so you get a lot of nutrients in there as well. So if you want to make something that's really strong, like if you have it on hand and your kid or yourself is having an allergic issue with, the environment and whatever type of season you're in, then make a strong one. You can fill that mason jar up halfway, put boiling water over that, let it steep for at very minimum 20 minutes, but up to 4 hours, and that can make it really strong, and you can use that as medicine. So that is really one of the primary actions I would say is that antihistamine property. And then secondary would be more of that nutrition, that nutritive property that it gives you.
Yeah. I actually have that in my cabinet because it is one thing that I make tea out of. And I learned it from my dad when my dad had some illnesses quite some years ago. It was recommended weirdly, but by a regular doctor. And so I did some research. And so since then I've just used it. So I just thought it was interesting that you brought that one up. And I think, again, when you are starting to have an interest in using herbs and things like that, caution. I always say, go with caution, make sure that you know what you're working with somebody, make sure that you've done the research, make sure you understand, especially if you are taking medications, if you do have dysfunction in your body, that you understand what any of the side effects could be. We're just educating you on the possibilities of things that are out there. And I think herbs are something that hopefully will start coming back into the mainstream a little bit more as we're progressing. And a lot of people's eyes are being open to this more holistic view and lens on things. I do think that, when we're talking about herbs, having certain things in your home in kind of like a quote unquote toolbox is good. It's having these things. It's like having, your Tylenol and your Motrin and whatever else you normally keep at home, like that kind of stuff. That's the way I want you to envision it, but it's just going to be with different alternatives in your box. So I think it's important. Mullein oil, I think I'm saying it right.
Yeah.
When my kids, they never really had ear infections, but they would get like upper respiratory stuff. And so we would put it in their ears, like in cotton balls, and it really helps a lot. The other thing that go ahead.
That's one that you can get in a tincture, the garlic mullein oil from
Yeah.
herb. Something that's very easy to get, and that can be done internally for ear infections. And internally meaning in the ear, not
not in your body. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was my first exposure to that. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so amazing and great. And so now I'm just adding that into my repertoire. The other thing is we use oil of oregano oil of oregano. They are different. It's one or the other. I'd have to look at the bottle. But whenever anybody has like a small cough or anything like that, we just put 9 drops in water, and it ceases the cough, whatever, like kind of, I don't know what exactly it does, but it just kind of cuts the cough and it thins the mucus.
It's a very strong antimicrobial. So oil of oregano, you have to be careful. So oregano oil typically is the essential oil.
Yeah, not that one. Oil of oregano. Yeah.
Oil of oregano is kind of the pressed oil that comes from oregano.
Yes.
It's very, very strong. So you definitely have to be cautious. So 9 drops is actually a lot. I don't know what brand you use, but you want to be careful because it's antiviral, antibacterial, anti-everything, but in a very strong way. And so just like when we talk about antibiotics can kill off good bacteria, we have strong herbs that can do that too. If you do it too much. So we need to not just like use these ridiculously. Yeah. So definitely in acute situations and not for a long period of time, but that is one of the stronger ones. Definitely. That is great.
Yeah. And when I say 9 drops, it's in a giant mason jar, and we don't drink it all at once. So it's my doctor gave me my recipe, so I follow the recipe. So again, which is why I'm saying to anybody listening, don't just go and purchase something and start dabbling on your own. Make sure that you are working with somebody who has a good understanding and can give you some recipes, because again, everything has the ability to harm and do good. So you just have to make sure you know what you're doing. But the whole point in wanting to have that discussion with you was because I want people to understand that there are other alternatives for your toolbox at home other than just the traditional meds.
There's another one that we can talk about is elderberry. That one is super easily accessible. You can buy elderberry syrup all over, but it's super easy to make yourself. You can get dried elderberries. I usually put a little bit of rosehip, which has got a lot of vitamin C, a little bit of clove in there. I could always get that at like my local organic store where they had some dried herbs. You can find them online as well. Mountain Rose Herbs is a really great place.
That's where I buy from.
Yep, that's a really great one to get in whatever quantity you want. They've got in bulk, they've got smaller quantities, but elderberry syrup is so easy to make, and it is in the research as effective as an antiviral as for the flu, at least, more so than actually getting a flu shot. They have done so much research on this that they have actually said that a strong tincture, so you can make in alcohol or glycerin, you can make a tincture, which takes longer, but you can also make just the syrup very strong over the stove. And this has such strong antiviral properties that it's basically what a lot of herbalists call like an herbal flu shot. So we know that we can use these things acutely. You can also use them preventatively as well. You can make this elderberry syrup and put a little bit of honey after it's cooled, and it's really tasty, and you just take a dose of it every day over the winter months, and that can be a really nice preventative. Another one that you may have heard of is fire cider. This is a combination very native to, kind of some of these indigenous cultures, but you can do, it's like garlic, turmeric, jalapeno. It's very spicy and fiery, but you also put honey in it to kind of dilute it, and that can really boost the immune system too. And that's more of like kitchen medicine, where we're talking a lot of just things you probably already have in your kitchen and making this cider out of it, and it's medicine.
Yeah. So I made my first elderberry. I always have bought it because one of the things, and I'm glad you brought up the flu shot. One of the things my pediatrician would tell us growing up is, oh, it's flu season. Here's your flu bomb. And so it would be, he's like, I'm just reminding you. So it would be elderberry, vitamin D, fish oil, vitamin C, they're different quantities of each, but, and he said, this is what you take, during these, right before school starts all the way until like February, March, something like that. And, knock on wood, I don't think we ever had the flu, the kids that I know of, that I remember. Maybe once, maybe a virus. I don't really think of flu, but anyways, I do believe wholeheartedly in elderberry syrup and the fire cider. Again, I don't know, it's magical, but it definitely works. But I also think just one of the things also was a remedy that my doctor had given us was just taking regular garlic, crushing it up, putting it with honey and cayenne pepper. And I mean, if you're not feeling good, pop a couple garlic bulbs a couple times a day. You'll be feeling okay in a couple, So again, I think that we just got to get back to the basics. We have to get back to our kitchen. I think that was well said, that what you said, it's like there's so many things in our kitchen that is healing, foods and which is, healing medicines. And so I just think, we need a little bit more of that to come back into our world. Because when my grandmother grew up, she did, it was something bark, and that's what they used for headaches. There was no aspirin, it was willow bark, I think.
Yep.
She would just cut a little bit, and and I remember being like, what are you doing? Like, I'm not going to take that. It's not a pill. Like, what?
Well, that's where it actually came from. That's where they discovered the molecule was from willow bark. So, or like, the willow tree. And I think this is really empowering because when we have this stuff at our fingertips, that we keep a little medicine box in our cupboard that is really this like natural herbal cabinet. It empowers people to be able to take care of themselves without relying on going to get a prescription or going to, it's like we take back that power and no longer have to give it away, as far as just having this ability to, take care of ourselves, have a little acute care. And you want to have things on hand because when you feel it, you want to get to it immediately. That's how herbs work. You don't want to wait a day or two because herbs, because they don't have the extreme potency of, say, like an antibiotic, they're not going to work the moment that you take them, and then that's all that you need to take. You need to continually take them, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times a day if you're in an acute situation, but it's preventative. Usually once, maybe twice a day is good, depending on what it is. But I just feel like having these tools helps us to be a part of our own medical care, right? In some way. And maybe it's a small way, but it's something, and it helps us to really just feel like we have what we need, right?
Yeah. And just by you saying that statement, I think that we give our power away a lot. And I think as women, as, whether you're a midlife empty nest mom or whether you're a mom of young kids, when you have kids, there is something about, there's almost like a catch-22. It's like you give your own power away, but then you become powerful for your children, and I just think that we've got to come into more balance with that, because moms need to care for themselves first, put your oxygen mask on, and then be able to help your family. And I think by, again, being empowered to know that you have options and you have different things that you can try on to see what feels best for you and your family is what this whole episode is all about, really. And it is about gut health, and it is about, that whole eczema. But in all of this is really about just showing you guys different opportunities and different modalities that you can try on to help yourself and help your children. Because again, lots of older kids have eczema too. It's not just the young kids. And adults have it alike, the psoriasis, it's all skin stuff. I feel like comes into the category. It's just, you know, eczema is one part of all of that. But I so appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom, because obviously you're very knowledgeable in what you do. And if you're listening and you have a child that has eczema, or you know somebody, please, you know, in the show notes, you're going to see where you can contact Abbie. Before we go, I do want to ask for a couple of non-negotiables that you have that you personally use or do on a daily basis to live your most vibrant life.
Yeah, I love that word vibrant so much. It's something that I use a lot too, because I think that's how we're meant to live, right? We're meant to live vibrantly. So non-negotiables for me are every single day I start with a nutritive tea. So I make a blend that is super easy. Like a lot of people might start with, I mean, I have some water, but I definitely don't reach for any caffeine right away. I do something that's very nourishing for myself. So I think that can be really simple. What I do personally is I use red raspberry leaf and nettle and chamomile and calendula. There might be one more in there. Usually a mix of something like that. They're all nutritive, so they have a lot of nutrition in them. And I just make a blend so that I can keep it on the counter. And every single day I just make that first thing in the morning. It feels really nourishing to me. That is super, I just feel like that is something that
Okay, so for somebody who doesn't know really what you're talking about, that maybe hasn't dabbled in that, are you talking about teas? Are you talking about, and where do you get them from? Kind of go into that, because some people might not have a clue.
Yeah, I'm just making a tea. So I use loose leaf tea.
Loose.
I have a mug that has like a little strainer in it. And I just put maybe like a tablespoon or so of that loose leaf tea in the mug, pour hot water over it, let it sit for 10 minutes or so, and I drink that every day. I buy mine in bigger bulk because I go through them. But like I said, you can buy smaller quantities, like 4 ounces or something like that for Mountain Rose herbs and make whatever blend. You could just do one of those herbs. You don't have to do all of them.
Yeah, and I think that's the super cool thing, is you can start with one, see how you like it, and add another one in, see, you know, and you make your own concoctions. That's what I think is pretty cool. And I do love, I have a lot of their teas, and I try the immunity one. I really do like. It's a combination of a lot of things. I do that a couple times a week. I like it. Okay, so sorry, go ahead. So that's what you do in the beginning of your day, every day, so that you start your day off feeling like you have something good that's going into your body.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a little ritual of self-care, I guess.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. You asked for two things, right?
Yeah, sure.
Non-negotiable. Oh, I'm trying to think what else that is. Does it matter what category it's coming from?
No, anything.
To live my most vibrant life. I would say really it's something as simple as getting somehow outside first thing in the morning. Getting my eyes, seeing the outside light first thing in the morning to me is super important to be able to really what it does, just because I'm such a nerd, it helps to really set your circadian rhythm, right? You're looking at the light, it tells your brain, okay, it's a start to the day. It's time to make certain hormones and do certain things. Our bodies are on such a clock. And I think because we have so many screens available 24/7, then that can get a little bit wonky, right? So stepping outside and having a moment of peace, whether that's 30 seconds, whether it's 5 minutes, whatever that is, I feel like moms, you know, whether they have kids still or they are an empty nester, finding that time to yourself that is so small but it's so meaningful is something that just starts you off on the train of doing things for yourself, self-care. Because once, you know, kids get up or maybe you get on with your day and you've got appointments and other things, it's just like some of those things just go out the window, right? So having those things, I think, right first thing in the morning, to me is just the easiest, the best way to set up for the day. And yeah, I love those.
Yeah, very good. I think those are really good ones because I think when you start your day off giving to yourself, then you have a fuller cup to give to other people. And we talk a lot about just within, you know, my community, we talk a lot about putting ourselves, you know, back in the game, basically, because, you know, for so many years, a lot of people have forgotten about themselves. And so I think just starting those little tiny morning rituals, which are self-care, you know, it doesn't have to be 4 hours. It could be 10 minutes. It could be 5 minutes, depending on whatever you have. You just have to start somewhere. And I'm sure you feel this way, but you feel so good when you do those little things that, you know, it's not a chore. It becomes like you like, I crave getting up in the morning to do those things, because I just know it's going to put me in a better state of mind. And for those of you listening that may not understand what she was talking about, when you go outside and you get sunlight in your eyes, it sets you up basically for the day of releasing hormones and all those things, but it also sets you up for better sleep at night. So one takeaway from this would be, leave your phone down, get up and do your thing, go outside for a couple of minutes, and then come back before you start dipping into the screen, because once you get the screen light, it all changes that up.
Yeah. And that's super important just in general for when we talk about like setting yourself up for the day for those self-care things. If it's really, really manageable, then I find that we're able to do other things that are a little bit more involved, right? It's like if you can almost promise yourself that you're going to do something really small and you continue with it, it kind of proves to yourself that you will do these things for yourself. You just kind of build bigger and bigger habits, but start small. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you deserve it and you're worth it. That's all of it. I mean, you're worth everything that you pour back into yourself. You deserve it. And that's the one message, again, that I think all moms, no matter what stage of life you're in, is you're worth that loved, giving back to yourself each day. So don't forget that as you're walking away this week, with all the other different 1% shifts that you could totally get from this episode, because there was so much goodness. Thank you so much for coming on and pouring into my community with your wisdom and all your knowledge. It's just so wonderful. So for you guys listening, I will see you guys next week. And I hope that, you report back on your 1% shifts that you get, and let us know how it's going. So thank you guys and have a good week.
Thank you for joining us today as we were journeying through the conversation of gut health and skin issues. A couple of the main takeaways that I wanted to talk about as Abbie and I were talking through different things is, number one, understanding the gut-skin connection is crucial for addressing skin issues, and understanding the importance of maintaining a balanced microbiome. Number two, identifying and managing the food sensitivities through testing can significantly improve overall health outcomes and your quality of life. So remember, we talked about the difference between sensitivities and allergies. And if you're looking to see if you have any of those, one of those functional tests would be amazing. Number three, embracing a holistic approach to your healthcare, such as functional lab testing and clinical herbalism, and empowers us to take control of, our own well-being. And we're not discounting the Western culture at all, but making sure that you're advocating for yourself and finding solutions that work for you, that get you that root cause approach from the top down, basically, so that you can heal yourself and feel your best. And lastly, prioritizing that self-care, the rituals, the morning routines that we talked about, fostering personal empowerment and supporting your holistic wellness. And then, by doing that, it should contribute more to a vibrant life that you're looking to live, and more of a balanced lifestyle rather than a quick fix. So I hope that, if you came into this episode not knowing much about functional labs and functional testing and root cause approach, I hope that you're leaving today with a little bit of understanding. And if you have any questions, make sure to reach out to Abbie or myself, and we would be happy to answer them. And also, if you're interested in working with Abbie, all of her information will be in the show notes so that you guys can easily access it. Until next time, I hope you guys have an amazing week, and I'd love to hear what your 1% shifts are for this week. So drop me a DM, send me an email. Absolutely love to hear from you guys. Talk soon. Bye. Thank you for tuning in to another episode on healthy lifestyle habits for midlife mamas. I hope you found a 1% shift this week to move you forward on your wellness journey. Remember, small changes add up to big transformations. I want to hear what resonated with you. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review and rate the show. Your feedback is truly the only way that I know that you're taking away 1% shifts, adding value to your journey. It is also a way for others to find the podcast. My dream is to empower others to create health and healing. And so I would love for this show to spread wide and far. To stay connected, please check out my Instagram and Facebook pages at Live Life Balanced with Robin. Join my newsletter and grab some freebies at livelifebalancedwithrobin.com. And if you're looking to work one-on-one with a health coach, feel free to book a discovery call on my website as well. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your day. It truly means a lot that you are allowing me on your wellness journey with you. Until next time, find peace, love, and light by breathing, being present, and allowing for all possibilities to happen. Have a great day.